Hilchos Issurei Biah Perek Shmini, the laws of forbidden relationships, chapter 8. The topic of today is the one word on the screen. It says Veset, or Veset in Hebrew. It means, the word Veset literally in Hebrew means established pattern, or fixed pattern. We're going to be talking about the laws that the sages enacted with regard to a woman who sees blood. When she experiences her menstrual period, Torah law says you only become impure the moment you see the blood. But the rabbi said if a woman has an expected time, that she knows naturally she's going to keep on menstruating at this time, so that becomes a halachic veset. That becomes a halachic pattern that's established. And now, even before she actually menstruates on that day, in the coming month, let's say, she'll have to be worried that that's going to be a day of menstruation. That's the dinim of visatot, established patterns. And there's going to be many different variations of these established patterns. And that's what we're going to be learning about today. It says the Rambam halacha aleph, yesh isha sheyesh la veses, v'yesh isha she'ein la veses. There are some women that have an established pattern of sighting, and other women don't. The women who don't have an established pattern, they don't feel anything until the blood comes out. And also there's no set day that she sees. So the woman who has no pattern is missing two things. Number one, she doesn't have physical sensations before the menstruation, and she also doesn't have a set date. On the other hand, the woman who has an established pattern also has two factors. Number one, she has a set date that she sees her period. Either every 20 days, or every 24 days, or less or more. That's the literal meaning. Some commentaries say when the Rambam says here every 20 days, he means every 20th day of the month. So it's really every 30 days, but it's every Yom Chaf in the month, or Yom Chaf Dalet. That's number one. Number one, she has a set day. Number two, halacha beis, v'koydem sheyaveh hadam, before the blood begins to flow, targish ba'atzma. She has some kind of sensations. Mifahekes, either she's yawning extra, or misateshes, or she sneezes in extra ways. V'chosheshes pikresa, she feels anxiety at the bottom of her abdomen. V'shipulei me'eha, and the intestinal area. V'yistamer saras besara, or yecham besara, the hair on her flesh stands up, or her flesh heats up. Some other of these types of effects. And then these sensations will come, either all of them or some of them, the actual hour that's usually established for her to see the blood. This is known in the Talmud and halakhic literature as hargasha, sensation. The commentaries today say women don't have sensation today. Hargasha doesn't exist, and it's not a halachic factor to be taken into account as a general principle. But the Rambam rules that both are required, an established day and physical sensations. Now, halacha gimel, kvar beyarnu, we've already explained, and this we explained earlier when we introduced the laws of the nida, shekol isha she'ein la veses, that if a woman doesn't have an established time of sighting, that means she can't expect when her menstruation is coming, asura l'shamesh ad shetivdek atzma techila. She's forbidden to have relations till she does an internal inspection, because it's forbidden biblically to have relations with a nida. And if you don't know when the nida is coming, so every time you want to get into relations, she has to do an internal inspection. If a woman does have an established time of sighting, even though she could expect when the menstruation is coming, asura l'shamesh b'chol oinas haveses. She's forbidden to have relations in the 12-hour period surrounding the established time, either 12 hours of the daytime or 12 hours of the nighttime. Investa bayoyim, asura l'shamish kaloisei hayoyim. If the established time of sighting is by day, so all day, from sunrise to sunset, she cannot have relations. Investa balayla, asura l'shamish kaloisei halayla. If the established time is by nighttime, so the whole 12-hour period of the nighttime is also forbidden to engage in relations. Umitchilas yom haveses, says the Rambam, from the beginning of the established day of sighting, tispar yemei nidasa v'yemei zivasa la'ilam, is the beginning of the day which the woman uses to count her 7-11 pattern. Remember this from yesterday and from 2 days ago? The entirety of a woman's life is a circular pattern, according to the Rambam, of 7 days of potential nida days and 11 days of potential ziva days. However, if you go in order, 7 plus 11 is 36. Women usually have a monthly type of sighting around 30 days. So the Rambam here is saying, every month you restart the count. That's the simple meaning of the Rambam here. It's 7-11 and 7, almost 11, till the monthly time of sighting comes back around. Once that time of sighting comes back around, you begin again from day 1. That's the straightforward meaning of the Rambam. That's the one we're going to adopt, although there's a lot of debate around this, but that's the basic meaning. Lefichach, says the Rambam, therefore, since even a woman who has a fixed pattern, has laws governing when she can have relations and when she cannot, women have to be very careful to keep track of their established times of sighting. She must keep track so she knows the day of the month, that is, and the hour in the day. Because you got to know if it's day or night, when she typically sees her blood. And now the Rambam introduces a concept which is going to come out in different ways throughout this chapter, and that is the concept of how to establish a Veset. How do you go about in the beginning establishing a set time for sighting? The bottom line rule is, in order for a day to be considered established, it has to happen 3 times. 3 times in a row makes a day established. Once a day is established 3 times, it cannot be de-established unless it's bypassed 3 times. So to become established, it needs 3 times, and once it's established, to get out of it being established, it has to happen 3 times. While you're waiting for a day to be established, in other words, it's happening once, it's happening twice, then you do need to worry about it only for 1 month. But if it's bypassed once, that derails it. Exactly. So once something becomes established 3 times, it needs 3 times to undo. But until it gets established, even a bypass once already takes it out of being a day to be worried about that perhaps menstruation is going to happen today. Now, as we go into it, it's important to know there's different types of established patterns. There's what we call Veset haflaga, which means a pattern of intervals. So every 20 days, a woman sees blood. That's nothing to do with the day of the month, the day of the week. It's nothing. It's simply a date, a space of time between a duration between one menstruation and the next. Then you have what's called Veset hachodesh, a pattern of the month. That means every month on a specific day, there's a sighting happening. Then you have Veset hadilug. It's the advancing period. That means every month she sees it 1 day later. So the 10th of Shvat, and then the 11th of Adar, and the 12th of Nisan. Understand? It's going upwards.
So those are all options.
Those are all options. And there are more, and we'll talk about them. But the point is, there are different ways to establish these established patterns, okay? So says the Rambam. We'll start with one example. Haya darko lirais b'yoyim esrim. Typically, this woman has a pattern of menstruating on the 20th day. And again, here the commentaries debate, does it mean every 20 days? Is this a haflaga veset, an interval one? Or is this a veset hachodesh, 20th day of the month? But the point is, she has a pattern already, okay? Uba yoyim esrim v'lo yirasa. And now, all of a sudden, 1 month, or 1 period of 20 days, comes day 20, no blood. Uba yoyim shloisha ve'esrim v'rasa. However, on day 23, there is blood. So now what happens? Says the Rambam, Hare yoyim esrim v'yoyim shloisha ve'esrim shnei asurim. The next month, both days are going to be forbidden. Why? Let's remember the rules. Day 20, which has already been established, hasn't been undone 3 times. It's only been undone once. So the next month you still have to worry about it. Day 23, which is a new pattern kind of coming up, you also have to worry about till you at least bypass once. So the next month, day 20 and day 23 are going to be forbidden.
There's a lot of possibilities, because again, we're not sure if we're talking about 20 days duration or 20th of the month.
Either way, let's call it 20 days duration, okay?
Okay.
So she already had, she saw at day 20, at day 40, at day 60, at day 80.
Right.
She has an established pattern of seeing 20 days.
Right.
Comes day 100, no blood.
103.
Huh?
She sees it on 103.
103.
Does she count 20 days from 103 or from 100?
100.
She counts 20
So
days
you're
from
going to still have to worry about day 120
right.
plus day 126,
She counts
which is 23 days from the 23.
That's what I was gonna
Understand? Yes.
But she doesn't count 23 days from 20. She doesn't count 20 days from 103.
Right. That would be if the case is the intervals. Let's say it's the case of the month. She saw on 20 Shvat, 20 Adar, 20 Nisan, 20 Iyar, and now comes 20 Sivan, no blood, 23 Sivan, yes blood. So then during Tammuz, both on day 20 of Tammuz and on day 23 of Tammuz, she has to worry. But both are the same concept. Now, if the second time the same thing happens itself, day 20, no blood. B'yom shleisha ve'esrim, she sees on day 23, v'lo yirasa b'yom esrim, not on day 20. Adayin shneihem asurim. The third month, both are still going to be forbidden. Why? Because day 20 hasn't been de-established 3 times, and day 23 hasn't been established 3 times, but it's still on the way, so it's got to be bypassed at least once. But if for a third time in a row, she does not see on day 20, but yes on day 23, not on day 20, so now day 20 has become purified, because it's been unestablished. Is that the word? What's the word for not established? De-established? I don't know if it's a real word. Anyway, the point is it's become purified. And now the established pattern moves from day 20, either of intervals or the month, to day 23 of intervals or the month. A woman can only establish a set time if it's established 3 times. And neither does she get purified from an established time of sighting till it goes away 3 times. Halacha hey, kol veses shenikba machmas oines. If an established pattern was originally established because of forces outside of her control, and it wasn't a natural flow. Something happened, a circumstance happened in her life, and it happens to be she menstruated 3 times in a row because of that. Even if multiple times she ends up seeing blood on the same day, not an established time of sighting. Because we say it's because of the outside factor. Most commentaries understand that the next words are an explanation of this. Kafza v'ra'asa. Kafza v'ra'asa. If, however, a woman were to jump, which basically means undergo some kind of strenuous exercise, and then she sees blood as a result of the jumping. She jumps again, and she sees blood as a result of the jumping, but not the third time, as the Rambam will soon delineate. Kava lavesas liyamim b'lei kfitzos. The established pattern gets established based on the days, not based on the jumping. Ketzat. What does this mean? Take a look here at the screen. You can see it on the screen. Kafza be'echad b'Shabbos v'ra'as adam. Sunday morning. Today's Sunday morning. She goes jump roping. Okay? And then she bleeds on that day. So it seems like the jumping brought about the bleeding. Ula'achar esrim yoim. Kafza be'echad b'Shabbos v'ra'as adam. 20 days later, again a Sunday, she jumps ropes in the morning and again sees blood. Ula'achar tisha asar kafza b'yom haShabbos. Then 19 days later, she decides to make her jump roping session a day earlier, on Shabbos, not on Sunday. So over here she's jumping. V'lo ra'as adam, no blood sighting. Ula'achar Shabbos ra'asa b'lei kfitza. And then the next day she sees blood now with no jumping. So if you look back, you're going to have 3 Sunday intervals. Bottom line, blood sighting. And you cannot blame it on the jumping, because what happened on the third time? She jumped another day. And still the blood came. So we can now have an established time of sighting. Now after 20 days passes on the Sunday, she's going to see blood. And therefore, 3 weeks later, she has to worry about that day and cannot have relations on that day, unless, of course, she doesn't bleed. Because it becomes known, it's the day that's causing her to see the blood, not the jumping. And this day has been established 3 times. Anything similar situations, we go after the same thing. If it's totally an outside factor, then we blame the outside factor. But if you can't fully blame the outside factor, like in this case, well then you have the Veset is established. Now that Rambam talks about Veset hadilug, an established pattern of advancement. Ra'asa yem chamisha asar b'chedesh zeh, v'yem shisha asar b'chedesh shel acharav, v'yem shiva asar b'chedesh shel acharav, v'yem shmeina asar l'chedesh shel acharav. A woman sees blood on day 15 of this month, day 16 of the next, day 17 of the next, and day 18 of the next. Notice that Rambam goes 4 times. Typically in halacha we say after 3 times it's established. Like the Rambam said in the last halacha, 3 times jumping, established. But over here, you can only know that it's an advancement after 4 times. Because the first time was day 15. You're only following the dilug after 3 months pass after that. Based on when the first sighting was, then you go once, twice, 3 times ahead each day once. This woman has established an established pattern of sighting with advancement, with a skipping 1 day. But what if the 4th month she wouldn't see on day 18? She would see on day 17. So again, 15th of Shvat, 16th of Adar, 17th of Nisan, and again the 17th of Iyar. So now, adayin lenikba leveses. We don't have an established pattern yet. And because of this, it actually works to her disadvantage. Now, the next month, she has to worry about all the days. Now, if that day passes once, then of course, that day is out of the count. The only time you have to have a de-establishment of three times is if you have an establishment of 3 times. If a date wasn't established only once, you only need 1 time bypass to undo it. So here also, you're only going to need 1 time for that date to be deleted. Zayin haya darka liros roya yom chamisha asar. A woman has an established pattern of seeing blood on day 15 of the month. Vishinsa lishisha asar. And for 1 month, she goes to the 16th. So this is like the last case. In the other halacha, Shnei Masurim, they're both forbidden. Day 15 will be forbidden because it's de-established and hasn't been de-established 3 times. And day 16, because it happened once, you got to wait for at least 1 bypass. Shinsa l'shiva asar, if the very next month she changes to day 17, hutar shisha asar, v'nesar shiva asar. So by the 1 bypass of 16 became permitted because it only was established once, so it only needs 1 bypass. But day 17, which is new now, becomes the day of worry for the next month. V'chamisha asar Issurei, but day 15, keep track, still remains forbidden because it's only been bypassed twice. Shinsa l'shmeina asar, once she changes to 18, nesar shmeina asar v'hutru kulam. Only day 18 is forbidden because that's the new one in the count, and 15's been purified because 15's been passed 3 times.
Assuming that she has to establish a pattern after that, how would she know the next one?
You wouldn't. You have to worry.
There's a 15th. Now it was a 16th. Or no,
Yes.
she had the 15th for May.
No, 15 was established. Then she goes to 16 1 month.
Okay, so now
That becomes forbidden, but 15 is still there.
Forbidden.
Then she goes to 17. That becomes forbidden, but 16 is allowed.
Right.
Then she goes to 18. The Rambam is saying 18 purifies them all. Now all the commentaries ask, 1 second, you just told me in the last halacha that if you go 15, 16, 17, 18, now you have an advancement problem. Now the next month you have to worry about 19. Right? So the Kesef Mishnah says that indeed that's true. The Rambam is only here talking about the relationship of day 18 to day 15. Showing you that with the advancement concept, day 15 has been undone. But of course, because you've gone 15, 16, 17, 18, next month you'll have to worry about 19.
Does it matter that it's advancing, or is just the fact that 15 was bypassed 3 times? I mean, like, what if it was like 16, 17, 16, or whatever?
Yes, exactly. So the same principle would apply over there.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what the commentaries say. That the Rambam over here is only talking about as it relates to undoing 15.
Right.
The fact that in this specific case, you'll also have to worry about other things, that's true. But it doesn't affect the concept of bypassing day 15. And what would make this halacha different than the other halacha in halacha number 4 was that halacha number 4, the first day was undone by 3 repetitive days of the next day. It was 20 and 23.
I see.
It's run to 23 twice. Here the Rambam is saying you can even undo a previous day by 3 different dates.
Right.
The point is, as long as you bypassed 15 3 times, it's done.
Got it.
Halacha ches, hoya darka lira yom esrim. Here's going to show you the extent to which you got to keep track of the original established day. Day 20 was established. V'shinsa liyom shnayim v'esrim, the next month, she misses day 20, and she sees blood on day 22. So, okay, classic. Shnei Masurim, they're both forbidden on the 3rd month, because 20 hasn't been undone 3 times, and 22 needs 1 bypass. Higia yom esrim v'lei rasa, shnayim v'esrim v'rasa. Next month, 20 is bypassed. 22, she sees blood again for the 2nd time. Adayin Shnei Masurim, so the next month, they're both still going to be forbidden. If in the next month, Higia yom esrim v'rasa, if she returns to seeing on day 20, what happens? Tahar yom shnayim v'esrim, day 22 is purified at this moment already. Follow this, it hasn't even come to day 22 yet.
Really?
Maybe she's going to see. But no, since she went back to the original established day, Shacharis chazra levista hakavua, since she went back to her original established pattern of day 20, so even though in 2 days from now, could be, based on the last 2 months, she may see on day 22, but the fact that she returned to her regular Veset is already enough. She has undone day 22 because it wasn't established 3 times, even though you're in advance, you're still before that day.
Usually you require 1 extra month.
Huh? Well, usually you have to wait till the bypass actually happens.
Right, and then it's 1 extra month, no?
Huh?
Usually
And then the next month you're good.
Okay, but then in this case,
because day 20 was already established before, the fact that she comes back to it already purifies day 22. All right. Halacha tes. Let's return to this calendar of the Nida Ziva days. Ein ha'isha koivas laveses b'soich yemei nidasa shelo asa bahen. Typically, it's even today. When women begin to bleed on their period, they don't just bleed for one day. They bleed for multiple days, right? So the Rambam is saying a woman cannot use those other days within her Nida days where she sees blood to establish a pattern. In other words, if she began to bleed over here on the Monday, okay, and she bleeds for 3 days, and then the next month comes, and it's the same day as the Wednesday. You don't say, well, she bled last month on this day, she's bleeding this month on that day, that's going to count towards the pattern. No, exactly. Once she sees blood for one day, the rest of the 7 don't count towards establishing the pattern. Additionally, a woman cannot establish a pattern by seeing in the blue days. Because the whole definition of the blue days are irregular days. Ziva days means irregular flow. So you can't establish a pattern of sighting based on stuff that happens in an irregular day. Which are the 11 days. But she could establish a pattern during the Nida days where she's not seeing blood, which means, as the Rambam said in the other chapter, once a woman has an established pattern of sighting, let's say on this day, so the moment this day comes in the next month, even if she isn't seeing blood, that already begins her Nida days. And then, if later on she begins to bleed in this round only on day 3 or on day 4, that could contribute to the next establishing pattern. Because since she hasn't yet seen blood in the Nida days, this new day will be considered a beginning relative to future months and establishing a future pattern. What if factually, this is what happened, for 3 months in a row, she bled on the same interval during the blue days. It was the irregular days, but you look at the calendar, that's how it's coming out. So we said before she can't establish a pattern during the Ziva days. But what do you do? What do you do if that happened? The Rambam says you do have to worry. And we'll soon see what that means, to worry. You have to worry that perhaps this is the beginning of something new. Nevertheless, even if there's an established pattern, but it's happening during the Ziva days, all it takes is one bypass to undo it. It doesn't need 3 times of undoing. Because the presumption is that bloods are removed from the system in these days. These are irregular days. So even if for 3 months in a row there was irregular bleeding, but the next month, if it's one bypass, boom. And the month following, you don't have to worry. Halacha Yud, what does it mean that she has to worry about establishing a pattern? So again, she's in the blue days, the days of Ziva, 3 months in a row, she's seeing blood. We're saying you have to worry about a new pattern. What does it mean to worry? That if based on this established pattern, the next month around, she sees blood again on that day, perhaps her calendar is resetting, and she has to wait 7 days where relations are not allowed. Typically during Ziva days, according to biblical law, you see one day, you only have to compensate with 1 day. You don't have to wait 7 days till you see 3 days in a row. But here, because for 3 months in a row, you've been seeing on the same irregular day, so now you got to consider it as if it's perhaps a new Nida cycle, and you got to wait 7 days. And on that day she cannot have relations, even if she didn't see blood. And here many texts have a bet, bishar yemei hafsatot, but we're going to go with the text of kishar yemei hafsatot, like any other established pattern day. Like any other established pattern day, that even if you don't see blood, you cannot have relations, so too over here, even though it's been established through irregularities, we treat it like a regular Veset day and no relations. Now, of course, if she bleeds for 3 days in a row, she's got a different law. She bled for 3 days in a row in the irregular flow days, she's a zava, she has to wait 7 clean days, in biblical times bring a sacrifice, the whole business. But for 1 day, that's what we're saying over here, that the rabbi said she has to worry if she establishes that pattern for 3 months in a row. Halacha Yud Aleph, Kol Isha Shemarba Livdek Atzma Tamid. If a woman is always checking herself, she always does inspections before she has relations, Harezu Mishubachas. She's actually praiseworthy. V'afal pisha yesh la veses kvua, even if she knows that she has an established pattern of sighting. It's very possible blood will come, not during the established time, and why wouldn't she want to know about it? She's a tzaddikus. She always wants to be aware that maybe she's bleeding. However, even this tzaddikus woman, during her 11 days of ziva, she's always presumed to be pure, no need for even a check. But after the days pass and she's back to what could be the regular times of sighting, she should continue her custom of checking herself. Yud Beis, Shachacha. You have Yashva. Okay, there's two versions here. One version says Yashva. If she was inactive, she just sat and didn't check. Other version says Shachacha. She forgot. Point is, she didn't do a bedika. Shachacha v'loi badka. A woman forgets, or she just doesn't do it. She's not inspecting herself. Bein ba'oines, bein beratz, and whether she's doing it under duress, she can't check herself, or she willfully decides not to inspect herself. Harezu b'cheskas tahara ad shetivdek v'timsa tmeya. A woman can presume herself to be pure till she checks and finds herself to be impure. Once you have an established pattern, you can pretty much rely on that. So if you didn't check, you presume that you're pure. Halacha Yud Gimel, ha'isha shalei badka atzma bish'as vesta. But what if a woman didn't check herself when it was the time that she was expected to sight? It's the regular day of the month. Ideally, you're supposed to check yourself on that day, the woman. But she didn't. 3 days later, she decides to make an inspection, and she finds herself to be impure. So now, we kind of go both ways. We grab the string on both sides. Even though ritually speaking, she's considered impure retroactively to the moment of her expected time of sighting. Kameshi Isbar ben Yantum V'Taraz will explain in the 10th book about ritual impurity and purity. With regards to relations, if somebody had relations with her the day before she checked herself, and now she checks and she's impure, that guy doesn't have a problem. She also only counts her days, 7-11 and all that calendar stuff, from the day she actually experiences the bleeding. Because we don't really know. We can assume that she had a time of sighting, but the fact is she only checked herself today. So for ritual impurity, anything she touched in the last 3 days are going to be considered impure. But for relations, no. Then of course, if a woman if she missed the expected date, and only 3 days later she checks herself, and now she's pure, you can presume her to be pure. Same thing if a woman sees blood, but it's because of a wound. She knows she has a wound in her internal organs. It's not period blood. Even if she sees the blood during the expected time of sighting her monthly period, she's pure, the blood is pure, as long as she's certain that it's not period blood, it's wound blood. Because the whole idea of worrying about expected times of sightings in later months is only a rabbinic decree.
Well, I thought that would make her a ziva if it was like a regular blood.
Huh?
If it's from a wound.
If it's from a wound, so we said in chapter 4 that wound blood is not the same as period blood. Tesvav, Kamashi Yisbar, Hilchos, Matami Mishkov Meshav will be explained in those halachot. There's a set of halachot called the halachot that govern those who make things they lie on and sit on impure. And there the Rambam says that the whole concept of these expected periods is rabbinic. Tesvav, Hasuma, a blind woman. Vaidekes Atzma, Umara Lechaverta. She must conduct internal inspections, but of course she can't be the one to decide. So she shows it to another friend. But a deaf mute and a mentally unstable woman, we don't trust them at all. They need other women to help them conduct the inspections and establish their patterns.
You can't transfer data to each other? If
Huh?
they touch, they don't transfer like that.
They will, but at least to know the dates. And only then will they be permitted to their husbands, because we can't trust our own inspections. Tezayin kol isha shetasa v'layada is vesta. What if a woman makes a mistake? It's hard to keep track of all these days. She makes an error in her calculations. She loses track of when her expected time of sighting is. And then one day she wakes up and she's bleeding. She needs to worry that perhaps this is coming in an irregular day, and can create a zava process if she sees for 3 days in a row. Lefichach, therefore, she must adopt all the stringencies. If she bleeds for only 1 or 2 days, she still must wait a full 7 days. Maybe it's the 7 days of nida, in which case, even if you bleed on 1 day, you're forbidden for all 7. But if she sees blood for 3 days, she has to assume maybe it happened in this time. She must count 7 clean days. Maybe she's standing now in the days of ziva. What can such a woman do to fix up her calendar? And to know whether she's an actual zava or maybe only a doubtful zava. And to bichlal, in general, to become aware once again of her ziva days. Says the Rambam, and as the commentaries explain it, really, she has no way out. Because a woman has to keep track of 7/11 for her entire life unless she gives birth. But for a woman who makes an error, we're a little more lenient. And the Rambam says, we're going to determine the solution based on how much she's bleeding. How many days a month is she bleeding? Ketzat. What does that look like? Let's talk this practically. If such a woman got into the situation of an error, so now the next time she sees blood, if she only sees 1 day of bleeding or 2 days, mashlemes alein shiva, we tell her, complete a 7-day cycle. Let's assume that it's these 2 days. So you have to finish 7 days of nida. And then begin counting 11 days from after that. And that's it. Just reset your calendar right here and now. But if she saw blood for 3 days in a row, we can't just say, maybe it's the orange days. No, maybe it's the blue days and you have to have 7 clean days. So then, harezus fake zava. We only say that she's a doubtful zava. We can't say for sure. Why? Because Shema shnayim kaidem hanida ushnayim mitchilas hanida. Excuse me. Shema yem echad mehan kaidem nidasa ushnayim mitchilas hanida. Maybe one of the days was this day, and 2 days were over here. After 2 days in the blue, you're not a zava yet. You need 3. Same if she sees 4 days in a row, it's still not enough for us to say she's for sure a zava. Shema shnayim kaidem hanida ushnayim. Maybe it's 2, the end of the orange, and 2, the beginning of the blue. And therefore, she must wait 5 more days to presume that maybe it's the nida days. So I described it the opposite. Maybe it's the 2 blue days before the orange and 2 days of the orange. Therefore, she must wait till the end of the orange day, so to speak. And then come 11 days of ziva after the 5, and then she resets her calendar. Same thing if she saw blood for 9 days in a row. Harezus fake zava. It's always going to be a doubtful zava. Shema shnayim kaidem yemei nida v'shiva shal nida. Maybe it's 2 days before the orange and 7 days of the orange. In other words, the Rambam skips from 4 to 9 because it's all the same principle. So even up to 9 days, it could possibly be 2 days before the nida, 7 days of the nida. And therefore, so she begins to count 11 days after the 9 days of bleeding. Even if she goes up to 11 days, it's still only a doubtful zava. Maybe it's 2 before the nida, 7 of the nida, 2 after the nida. She never became a full zava. And she's left with 9 days of the 11 days. But if a woman who is in error about her calendar sees blood for 12 days in a row, there's no way out. You're for sure have seen 3 days crossing the irregular days. She's a certain zava. Even if you have 2 before and 7 of the nida, you have 3 days after the nida time. And we'll tell her that she has 8 days left to her ziva count, of course, of which she must have 7 clean days before she can resume relations with her husband. Same thing if she has 13 days of sighting, so the maximum we're going to be able to say is that it was 2 days before, 7 days of nida, and 4 days after, and therefore, shiva, she'll remain with 7 days of the ziva days, which then become the days of the counting of the clean days. If she extended her blood sighting, even for 1,000 days in a row, then of course she's a zava. So the moment the bleeding stops, she simply counts 7 clean days. After the 7 days, her nida days begin. Her calendar resets. only for this woman, special law for her mistakes. Chav Beis, the Rambam concludes, Hine lamadata. Now you have learned. Shekol ataya, that any woman who gets a mistake in her calendar, Eina moina mishayifse kadam paches mishiva. She'll never have to keep track for less than 7 days after the blood stops, which is the case if she bleeds a lot. Then she only has to count 7 days of clean and keep going. V'lo yoser al shiva asar, and no more than 17 days. V'yavayu yemeni dasa, and then her nida day will come. In other words, when a woman comes to court and says, I lost track of my calendar, it's going to be a minimum of 7 days and a maximum of 17 days before her calendar resets. Ketzad, how will that look like? Because if the next day she sees blood, only for 1 day, and then the bleeding stops, Mayna Shiva Asar, we're going to tell her to count 17 days. Imagine as though it's the first day of the Nida. Shisha L'Tashlum Nidasa, take 6 more days to finish the Nida cycle. V'achad Asar Yemei Zivasa, 11 days of irregularities. V'yavayu Yemei Nidasa, then go back to counting your calendar as though the Nida days begin again. But if she has crossed the threshold of 13 days of sighting or more, she simply counts 7 days from when the blood stops, and then her calendar resets to Nida days, as we've explained.